far-right commentators like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, they seem to be questioning why Iran is the U.S.'s problem. How do you respond to that?
Well, very simply, it's hard to understand what these people have in mind. The Iranians say openly that Israel is the little Satan, the United States is the big Satan. We have a problem understanding that some people really believe in certain ideas.
So this has been a week of contrasts, particularly for those of us who follow politics closely here in the United States and abroad. With regards to Iran, when we're going over to the other side of the ocean, the biggest sponsor of terror in the world, they've been pursuing nuclear weapons forever and ever. We had the disastrous JCPOA, the Iran deal, which allowed them to develop nuclear weapons. Just not now, just in 10 years. By the way, those 10 years are up. Trump this week said he sent a letter to the Ayatollah Khomeini saying it's time to give up your nuclear program. Publicly, Trump said, quote, "We're down to the final moments. Can't let them have a nuclear weapon." We know when Trump speaks, people listen. We know his threats are not empty. More importantly, they know his threats are not empty. That's the good part. The bad part is somehow the wacky conservative commentators on the far right seem to be standing with, wait for it, Iran. I mean, it's bizarre to hear Tucker Carlson have Al-Thani from Qatar there trying to sort of defend Qatar and how they're funding terror in the Middle East. His tweet says something like Fox News is telling us that Iran is a quote-unquote sponsor of terror, softening the base for war. It's incredible. It's as if he's now suddenly a supporter of Iran, thinking that it's just Israel's war, not that Iran has been threatening the United States and the West for so long. Israel and the United States and their allies understand this, but those that used to wear bow ties for many years somehow don't. I'm not sure where that's coming from. There's lots of theories about funding. I don't ascribe anti-Semitism easily to folks. I just ascribe stupidity, and that's really what I'm seeing. Anything to package things in isolationism, sometimes in anti-Israelism, whether that's anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism, only time's going to tell. But the reality that we're seeing now is just really incredibly stupid commentary coming from the likes of Tucker Carlson and, of course, Candace Owens. No surprise there. She speaks really nice. She looks decent on camera. But the words that come out of her mouth just make us all stupider, to quote Adam Sandler. Big supporter of free speech. They should be able to say whatever they want, but we should be able to respond, which is what we are doing here. And their commentaries on supporting those like Iran and seemingly backing people like Assad in their statements about Syria now and the horrors that are happening in Syria, they should be relegated to the chat rooms where they talk about flat earth and all these other stupidities that no one really believes. We can't take our eye off the ball. This is a serious moment in the world. We finally have American strength and deterrence being reestablished all over the world. This is good, not just for Israel, not just for Saudi Arabia, not just for Europe, but for Americans here in our borders in the United States of America. When we continue to see the U.S. assert itself under President Trump and the leadership of President Trump, we're seeing incredible policies being put into place, especially when it comes to the Middle East and Israel and protecting Americans here in the United States. But to talk about these things and to understand them better today, we have Yechiel Leiter, Israel's new ambassador to the United States. He's an old friend for many, many years. His son, Moshe Leiter, may his memory be a blessing, was killed in war in Gaza about a month in. He was part of what's considered like the Delta Force of the Israeli military, 39 years old, father of 6, incredible person. He will not have been lost in vain because I'm confident that Israel and its allies will complete this war and end Hamas. But really, nuance is the word of the day, and getting a real understanding of what's happening is so critical, which is why I invited Ambassador Yechiel Leiter back on the show. I hope you enjoy it. This is Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman. Ambassador Yechiel Leiter, thanks so much for joining me again.
It's good to be with you, Gabe.
You know, the audience might be thinking, I've seen this guy before. He wasn't wearing a suit and a tie. He didn't have all the fancy pins on. And they might be right, because you are actually the first guest that we've had in 75 or so episodes that is the second time on the show. You were on the show in October. It was before you were nominated as ambassador of Israel to the United States, where you serve now. It was a totally different time. We were just having a conversation about your background and who you are and your perspectives on the current situation. And now you're back here sitting in Washington, D.C. It's really an honor to have you back on the show, Ambassador.
Well, it's an honor for me to be with you. Let me assure you, I'm the same person. I get called His Excellency and Mr. Ambassador. I'm Yechiel. I've always been Yechiel. I'll be Yechiel today, tomorrow, and it's a great honor to be Israel's ambassador to Washington. But I'm the same person I've always been.
Well, that's why so many people admire you, Yechiel, Mr. Ambassador, Your Excellency, all the terms that we're supposed to use, just out of respect for you and the office and the countries where you serve. But listen, now it's a serious time. It's interesting. I was looking up the date you were on, I think October 19th, if I'm not mistaken, of last year. Just a week later, Israel was able to attack Iran and take out many of its anti-aerial defense systems, the S-3000s or S-300s, if I'm not mistaken. And now it seems like Iran is back. Iran is back on the chopping block. We've seen Trump say last week, we're down to the final moments, can't let them have a nuclear weapon. Strong words from the president. He sent a letter out to Iran. What's changed since October till now when it comes to Iran and its nuclear ambitions?
Well, Iran has advanced their nuclear ambitions. They're in a race to achieve offensive nuclear weapons. And in the context of that race, they are also continuing to do what they can to sponsor terrorism around the world. Particularly now, as we talk, Iran is very involved in inciting violence in Judea and Samaria. And the violence we've seen over the past few weeks is all Iran incentivized. They are a menace. They are a bad actor. And if, God forbid, they were to achieve an offensive nuclear weapons, all the terror they sponsor would be performed under a nuclear umbrella, making it much more difficult for the good actors, led by Israel, to contend with Iran in the Middle East. So it is imperative that we move into a tandem with the United States and other allies who understand the dangers of Iran in order to eliminate that threat. Now, it's important to emphasize, it doesn't have to be a kinetic operation if the Iranians choose to let us in, to remove the fissile material, and physically destroy their nuclear infrastructure. There's no alternative which would allow for the Iranians to maintain their nuclear infrastructure. That has to be destroyed, because otherwise, fissile material could be removed, and at a later date, they can reactivate, reconstitute the infrastructure that they've built. It has to be something very similar to what was done in Libya, in which the West Allied forces moved in, removed the material, and destroyed the infrastructure. Anything less than that is simply unacceptable.
It seems from where I sit that the United States and Iran today the United States and Israel, forgive me, are walking lockstep when it comes to Iran and so many other issues. It seems also when you look closely, the United States Congress seems to be in lockstep as well. The commentators, not so much, right? If you look at some far right commentators like Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens and all these friendly faces, I say that facetiously, obviously, they seem to be questioning why Iran is the U.S.'s problem. Tucker yesterday put out a tweet saying Fox News is telling us that Iran is, quote unquote, a sponsor of terror, softening the base for war. But what does that mean? How does that really apply to the U.S.? How do you respond to that?
Well, very simply, it's hard to understand what these people have in mind. The Iranians say openly that Israel is the little Satan, the United States is the big Satan. We're the canary in the coal mine. We're warning the West that Iran intends to spread its influence all over the world. We have a problem understanding that some people really believe in certain ideas. And we all think that around the world, everything goes down like it does back in Tallahassee. Well, it doesn't. The Middle East is different, and certainly the Iranian regime is different. These mullahs have proven that there's one thing they don't lie about, and that's their intent to destroy Israel and destroy the West. How do I know that they don't lie? Because just this year, they've already sent over 400 ballistic missiles into Israel. I mean, what country in the world would tolerate having ballistic missiles fired into its civilian population centers. And by the grace of God, no one was killed. But that's due to superior technology, and that always doesn't work. There could be another attack, and we could sustain severe losses. So that's just simply intolerable. We can't have a country firing ballistic missiles at anyone. If they achieve nuclear capabilities, those ballistic missiles will be outfitted with nuclear warheads. They say that that's what they intend to do, and they have shown that they act on their intentions. So if people want to live in a land of make-believe and try not to let it show, they're entitled, but at least they're not in government. And it's very clear to us that the Trump administration is not listening to those voices, which are very much in the minority and somewhat less significant than other voices. And they completely understand that the West is facing a very serious threat. I mean, even countries in Europe, England and France and Germany, who comprise the group of countries that are monitoring the situation, are very insistent that the nuclear program in Iran be terminated. So this is something that we're in the lead on. Prime Minister Netanyahu has called the West out in 2015. The Joint Address to Congress, he's made it very clear that this can't be maintained. And he's galvanized the majority of the West into this understanding, into acting against the nuclearization of the mullahs in Tehran.
So other than kinetic strikes, which means actual attacks on Iran, and let Iran allowing or not allowing, or foreign forces going into Iran to dismantle the nuclear capabilities that they have, or nuclear materials that they have in place today, do you think sanctions have the ability still of working, or are we really past the tipping point?
That remains to be seen. The president has been very clear. He's implemented a policy of maximum pressure. We have to see that their oil export is reduced to zero. When President Trump left office in 2019, their oil exports, had been reduced from 3 million barrels to 300,000. They then went up again under the past administration to 1.8, 1.9 million barrels. We have to get them down once again to under that 300,000 mark, perhaps to zero. We must reduce it altogether. And if that has the effect of either having the mullahs turn back the nuclear program or bringing this fanatic regime down, so be it. We have to hope and pray that this maximum sanction policy works. We're not convinced that it will, but it's certainly a very good start.
So let's just keep moving down this, as the complexities continue. When you look at the map surrounding Israel, if you go down to Syria, we've been seeing images all week of HTS, this new group, not really a new group, but a new name of an Al-Qaeda affiliated group who's taken over in Syria, murdering Christians, and this disgusting images that there's really have outraged so many around the world. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has put out a strong statement against it, as have so many, really any good person who watches those images. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in Syria today and what that means for the West.
Well, what's astounding is that this group that took over Syria, the HTS, and the leader, Julani, is being touted as someone that the West can talk to and embrace. And actually, Western leaders were lining up to meet with him and bring him into the family of nations, despite the fact that there's not a long history of jihadis turning into Jeffersonian Democrats. This guy was a member of Al-Qaeda. He was a longtime participant in Al-Qaeda. He's gone on record speaking on behalf of Al-Qaeda and acting as a Al-Qaeda terrorist. So if he's actually turned a new leaf, great. But what we'd say is, distrust and verify. Let's be very vigilant and see what materializes. And we got a taste of what materialized just the past few days when his organization massacred hundreds, and we believe now it's over 1,000 citizens in cities like Latakia in northern Syria. This was a bloodbath. the films coming out of these towns and villages is horrific. People being paraded around, told to get down on all fours, bark like dogs, and then being shot in their legs, then in their arms, and then in the rest of their body, murdered mercilessly in town squares, children in front of parents. Our insistence here on this issue is that these forces cannot move in the direction of Israel's borders. We experienced a colossal debacle on the 7th of October because we were not vigilant enough about jihadis on our borders, and we cannot let that happen again. So our main concern is keeping these jihadis away from our borders, protecting the Druze and Kurdish communities that are close to our borders at the same time, and ensuring that there's some degree of stability, at least in our general region bordering Syria.
Is there a scenario where Israel would cross the border into Syria to protect the Druze communities there?
Well, Israel is already sitting in Syrian territory. We have no territorial claims to Syria, no territorial claims to Lebanon, nothing in the north. We're there for one reason and one reason alone. That's to protect our borders. The moment that those countries stabilize completely, we'll come back to the recognized border in the Golan. We have no interest in annexing territories in Syria. We have one concern, and that's our national security.
Just bring it back closer, even closer to Israel, to Gaza itself. Gaza's back again. We're trying to figure out whether this war is going to reignite or not. Deals have been on the table. It looks like the United States was negotiating directly with Hamas, at least attempting to see if they can get a deal. At least as we sit here today recording, that doesn't look like it's going anywhere. No surprise to anyone who's looking. What's the future of Gaza? Are we going to be emigrating people from Gaza out of Gaza? Is the war starting again? How do you see the next 30 to 60 days unfolding?
Well, the war doesn't have to start again because it was never over. There's not day-to-day military confrontation right now in Gaza, but the war is in no way over. The government set 3 goals right at the outset of this war. Number 1, the destruction of Hamas. Number 2, the release of all the hostages. And number 3, the creation of a scenario in which Hamas will no longer reign in Gaza. And we're committed to achieving those goals. Now, right now, we have hostages that are still alive. They're still holding on to many bodies of the hostages that they murdered. And we're doing what we can in lockstep with the United States to get those hostages released. The expression that's being used by many in the journalistic community that we're trading prisoners, we have prisoners, they have hostages. The prisoners that we're holding are hardened terrorists. Many of them that we have to release in order to get our hostages out have murdered people like the Bebas babies. And we are in a very difficult position where we have to negotiate through the services of Qatar and Egypt and the mediating services of the United States. But we have to do what we can to get our hostages out. And it's very clear that the end game is not going to result in Hamas left standing in Gaza. It's a commitment that the people of Israel have really to themselves and to humanity. These monsters can't be allowed to stand. They have butchered, they've murdered, they've raped and pillaged. These people have to be destroyed the same way the Nazis were destroyed. I heard very often early on in the war, people saying, well, you can't destroy an idea. Well, of course you could destroy an idea. Where is the Nazi idea today? In the minds of some deranged individuals, perhaps on the internet. But if you take power, political and military power, away from an idea, the idea dies. What we've got to do is take any military and political power away from this murderous organization, which is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. We're also in a battle for ideas. Muslim Brotherhood is not resigned to Gaza and to Hamas. It exists elsewhere as well. Unfortunately, the president of Turkey is a adherent of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he has continuously make statements regarding Israel, regarding the government of Israel, regarding the prime minister of Israel, which is simply intolerable. It is a Muslim Brotherhood kind of message, and it has to be contended with. So we're doing our best to contend with this situation and with the Muslim Brotherhood influences, uh, certainly in our region, but around the world as well. I mean, that statement has to be made and drilled home. The West has to confront the scourge of anti-Western civilization, hatred, and violence.
So just to drill down a little bit more on this, I mean, Trump put out a plan that he wants to move out the Gazans from Gaza itself to be able to rebuild and not give them a right to return. That's something that was really celebrated by many people around the world, even people that had questions about it, didn't have any other better options. But it's not like the Arab countries in the region lined up and raised their hand and said, here, we'll take them. Quite the contrary. All of them got together and said, we're not going to take them at all. Does Trump's plan have any legs?
It has tremendous validity, I think. Why not give people a choice? I find it was simply incredulous that people would write off the plan out of hand. Nobody's forcing them out. I don't think that anybody believes that they'll be forcibly removed. Nobody's talking about that. The president is talking about giving them an option. And I think the president is the first leader to come along and say, let's entertain this possibility. Let's see what the people themselves want. If somebody wanted to leave Gaza until now, they weren't able to because Egypt closed down the border and didn't let them out. And all we're saying is, open the gates. And we're willing to certainly facilitate those who would like to leave, but it's a problem now for them to leave under the aegis of Hamas, as long as Hamas is still in power. When they many tried to leave, they were shot at and prevented from leaving. So allowing this plan to take place while destroying Hamas at the same time is an imperative. They have to have their political and military power mitigated. And I think that the reason why you mentioned the Arab states who oppose the plan, well, they oppose it verbally. I'm not sure that behind closed doors they're as opposed to it as they are in public. But you have to understand that there's been a narrative that's been sold to the world, for ever since Israel was created, basically, that we're the reason why there's a quote unquote Palestinian problem. The Arab states have rejected Israel from day one. And if they stop rejecting Israel, like the UAE, like Bahrain, like Morocco, then Israel doesn't have to withdraw or fork over territory. We just have to live together. And we can have reconciliation with the Palestinian Arab community, certainly with the states around us, if they just stop giving up this idea that Israel's going away and stop using the Palestinian Arabs as a whipping boy to get at Israel. You have to change the narrative. If you're willing to change the narrative that it's Arab rejectionism for Israel's existence, which is the problem, and not the Palestinian Arabs, then everything changes. The whole equation of the Middle East changes. The reason why it's difficult to get their arms around the Trump plan is because they find it difficult to give up a narrative. But President Trump is saying there's a different narrative that you can choose, and that narrative is the betterment, raising the Human Development Index and building something else that's modern, that is economically viable, and that raises human dignity, and not the same rounds of violence that we've experienced. You have to remember that not only was Israel the victim of incessant violence coming out of Gaza, the Gazans themselves are living under a dictatorial, horrific terrorist regime. And give them the opportunity to be free, to choose themselves. And that could be the beginning of a widespread change throughout the Middle East.
Ambassador, final question. Anyone who knows me or listens to the podcast or has heard me speak for at least 2 minutes will know a few things. They'll know that, first of all, I love my wife and my family, but also I'm a proud American. I'm a proud Jew. I'm a proud Zionist. I love the United States. I love Israel. I've been watching this war from the edge of my seat since the minute it broke out early October 7th of almost a year and a half ago. What's incredibly frustrating to me, and maybe to you as well, after this many months of war of the United States and Israel and the support that we've had, it's been obviously much better under Trump in the last couple months, but Israel has been really at it in Gaza for so long. And yet, when we've seen in these last weeks these releases of hostages from the dungeons of hell in Hamas, in Gaza, of Hamas in Gaza, and we see Hamas still parading around, putting up these supposed shows of force, negotiating with some sort of leverage. It seems like they still at least think they have, after so much damage that Israel's been able to cause there, and so much that Israel's been able to take out of Hamas's infrastructure and military capabilities. But yet Hamas is still there. They're still not just in power; they're still negotiating as if they have some leverage. Specifically, what can Israel do with the United States' support or without the United States' support to really change that power dynamic, to finally put an end to this war, accomplishing those goals that you mentioned?
Well, the first thing we're going to do, we've already began to implement this, is there's a cessation of truckloads of what has been called humanitarian aid, but has just really been material sustenance for the Hamas to make a business out of it, to take all this material, foodstuffs and otherwise, and sell it and be able to pay their operatives. The people are still being denied, but there's an overwhelming amount of food in Gaza for weeks to come. But we're not going to continue to pay the Hamas or to allow the Hamas to do business with international funding. That has to stop. And we're going to stop the electricity and supplies of the basic daily needs. The people have to move into one particular place, into where we've given them safe passage to, the Mawasi area, just like as we did in Rafah. You probably recall when the previous government warned us not to go into Rafah, that there'll be thousands of people killed. No one was killed. In 10 days, the people were moved to safety, and we provided them with what they need. We'll do the same again in order to confront Hamas and destroy them. So they can parade around now. It's painful to see. It's painful to watch. But we need patience, perseverance, resilience, and determination. These people are going to be destroyed. Listen, Gabe, they took men, women, and children, holding them in dungeons underneath the ground. Who could imagine this could take place in the 21st century? Okay, we dig tunnels in Jerusalem to uncover 3,000 years of history. We are a people indigenous to the land of Israel. That's what we dig tunnels for. They dig tunnels to put missiles inside of them and to hold people hostage. That has to end. We discovered 450 miles of tunnel underground in Gaza used for terrorism. That's the entire width of the state of Pennsylvania. It's unconscionable, and we have to put an end to it. Patience, perseverance, or we're going to put an end to it.
Ambassador Yechiel Leiter, thanks so much for joining me. I think I can talk to you for hours about all these issues. I look forward to doing so at another time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gabe. As always, it's good to be with you on Standpoint.